enjoyed school when I was in school. And when I was in year 12, I decided I didn't want to go to uni after I went to year 12. And so I went, I don't need to really worry about what I do subjects-wise. So I did the subjects I really enjoyed, one of which was chemistry. For any of you who know a lot about chemistry, you might find that a little bit weird, but I really, really loved chemistry in high school. And I was thinking about it a lot as I have just enrolled in uni for this year, and thinking about how much I enjoyed chemistry. I'm not doing chemistry in uni, which I was a little bit sad about because I have to do biology, which I didn't really enjoy quite as much as chemistry. So I've been thinking a lot about chemistry recently. And I was thinking about this principle that we learned about when I was in year 12. And it's called Le Chatelier's principle. I think we have a slide. If we can go to the next slide. Okay, so this is a principle that we learned in chemistry about something called chemical equilibrium. Chemical equilibrium is when you have a system that's got chemicals, and basically there's two different reactions happening, but they happen at the same time. And so while two things are adding together to make one thing, the one thing that's being made is also being broken down to make the two reactants. And it's like an ongoing cycle, and we'll get to the equation in a minute. But the thing that you learn about is if stress is put onto the system in equilibrium, it will favour one of the production of either the reactants or the products. And so Le Chatelier's principle is if stress is placed on a system in dynamic equilibrium, forcing it to no longer be at dynamic equilibrium, a net reaction will take place to oppose the stress by favouring the production of the reactants or products. I did have that memorised in year 12, it was pretty impressive. If we go to the next slide, we'll get to see what it actually looks like, because that sentence is a little bit confusing for anyone who doesn't know anything about chemistry. So basically when you have a chemical equation, you have two reactants, so you might have table salt, for example. Table salt is hydrogen and chlorine, basically, and they add together and you get salt. And chemical equilibrium is when the reactants are being made into the products. What way are we going? Reactants be made into the products, so that's the little arrow going that way. But then the products are also being made into the reactants, so that's the arrow going that way. And it's like a continuous cycle of them being made and broken down at the same time. And it's really weird because you don't really see anything happening when you're looking at it, but there's it's wacky. Anyways, when you have this system and you're placing stress on it, like I was talking about just before in that fancy principle, there's three things that can impact the system that can make it favour one reaction over the other. So, and those three are temperature. So if you heat it up, it might need to favour the cold reaction so that it can be like average temperature. And then there's concentration, and there's also volume. A few different things that you can do to the system that will make it do different things. But basically, one of them's always playing catch up until it's stable. It's kind of confusing. I hope that made a little bit of sense. Now, humans also do this. We're obviously not closed systems. A closed system is like it's got no air coming into it and stuff like that. We're not closed systems because we have air and such, but we do have parts of our bodies that are closed systems. But humans working in equilibrium is called homeostasis, for those of you who know what that big fancy word means. It's basically when your organs work in an equilibrium, kind of like how you make insulin. So you eat food, you have more sugar in your bloodstream, you make more insulin, or kind of whatever way that works. But basically, humans have also do this. It's called homeostasis. But there's this constant give and take from one thing or the other until a balance is found. Now, chemicals do this, and our organs do it. But it also can extend into our lives. If we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, I did a little brainstorm of all of the things that have an impact on my life. So for me, that's things like my faith, really important thing. Family and friends, health, church, work, uni, all the things that if something goes wrong in one of those areas, it's going to affect me, whether that's my physical state, emotional state, mental state. Now, all of you, take a second just to think about what your brainstorm might look like. What parts of your life impact you the most? Maybe there's some of the things on there. I'm not going to make you share them, but take a second to think about that. Now, when we put more value on one of these areas than the others, it leads to something called burnout. I'm sure that 90% of the people in this room have experienced burnout before. Now, burnout is something you can get like a fancy diagnosis for, but it's also something that can just happen. It happens when we put more emphasis on one area in our lives. Maybe I'm putting a lot of thought into work. I'm spending all my time at work. All my life outside of work is spent with the people that I work with. And it goes on until my entire life is consumed by work and I can't think about anything else. And it basically leads to you just shutting down. And it's a really difficult thing. That whole mental health side of it is something that's really, really difficult and scary to talk about. But the fact of the matter is 90% of people, I mean, I don't know if that's a right statistic, you could probably Google it, but like most people will experience burnout at some point in their lives. Okay, now if we can go to the next slide. I had to think about how my life looks in my dynamic equilibrium equation. So, I have friends, health, church, work, uni, God. Now, all of those things, placing emphasis on one of them, can lead to something unhealthy happening. So if I'm spending all my time with my friends, I spend no time with anything else, I don't work, 24/7 I'm with my friends, or 24/7 I'm with my family. Sometimes that might lead to a loss of identity. When you're putting all of your self-worth in other people, you lose yourself. Maybe if you don't think about your health for a really long time, it's going to cause you to become unhealthy. If I come to church, and this might hit a bit close to home for some people, but if I come to church and I put all of my work into giving into the community, into serving, into volunteering, then you're not getting anything out of church. And that can lead to a little bit of a change in your faith and the way that you think about that. And if I put all my time into work and all my time into uni, I'm overcommitted and I don't have time to focus on those other things. The one kind of thing in my dynamic equilibrium equation that I can't get enough of is God. No amount of time I spend with God is going to cause something unhealthy to happen. Okay, so now we're going to have a think of the Bible verses that we read today. Except I have another Bible verse, and we're going to go all the way back to Eden, like right at the beginning, when God created the earth. Can I have Genesis 1, next slide, perfect. Genesis 1, verse 26 to 28 says, "Then God said, 'Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds of the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over the creatures that move along the ground.' So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God he created them, male and female he created them. God blessed them and said to them, 'Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and over every living creature that moves on the ground.'" In this Bible verse, I have the important parts underlined. I don't know if you can see the yellow very well, but it's there. Now, every human being is built with a desire, whether that's a desire to do more things or have more things or just, gain more followers or whatever it is in your life. Everyone wants more. You get to a point and you never stop and go, "I'm satisfied, this is good." It's always the next best thing. That we have this identity that we're made for something more. We're never satisfied with where we are. Now, this isn't a bad thing. This is something that's actually put into us by God. So if you have a look, it says that we're made in the image of God. The word they actually use in the original text is the word selim, which is also in other times in the Bible found to mean an idol or a statue. So not only are we made by God, but we're made to be his idols, his statues. Now, in the biblical times, these statues were used mostly to be created, and they'd be like, "This is a god, come bow at this giant gold thing and praise this god." And basically they'd say, we're making something invisible and we're making it visible. We're taking this idea and this construct that we have and we're making it a physical thing. So when God makes us in his image, in the original text, he's talking about making us so that we can make the invisible visible, that we can show his work to the world. The next thing he says is that we may rule over the sea and the birds. Now, in the context of this, it's meaning to take something somewhere. It's like, I have this really amazing thing, and there are birds and fish and trees and wood and whatever, and I want something made out of it. So he's putting humans on earth to be the vision and the image of him, to take it somewhere. The next thing he says is fill and subdue. So we've got why we're put on the earth. Now we get a little bit of a job description of what we're meant to do. The first one is fill and subdue, and the word for this in the Hebrew is kabash, which it can be a bad thing in some contexts. It's like, talking about demons and whatever. But basically the premise of it overall in the Bible is bringing order out of chaos. Taking something where there's a lot of mess and don't know what to do with it, and making it into something. And then it says to work and take care of it. That's our second part of our job description, is to work and take care. Now the word that's used here is abad in the Hebrew, and it means both to work in this context, but later on in the Bible we actually see it used to mean worship. And so God's talking about how the work we do is actually worship to him. But we're called to draw potential out. If you have a look and you read kind of the whole way through Genesis, you can see that the work that God is calling his people to right at the beginning of the earth is to draw potential out of what is nothing. He put Adam and Eve in the garden to work it. But that wasn't to, plow the fields and, make sure everything was doing the right thing. It was to build something. To see a tree and cut it down and go, I'm going to make a house out of that. To take the raw material, the raw things and the good that God placed in the earth, and to put it to its full potential. So basically, God's description of work in Genesis, it's not a burden. Obviously, a lot of the work in our lives is for something, whether that's working for money or to gain something or an opportunity. But this isn't a bad thing. He's asking us to restore that so that we can see work as a burden, and that we see work not as a burden and achieve new things. Now I have a quote for you, not being antisocial. This quote is from Mike Breen. He wrote a really cool book about building and discipling and kind of the culture surrounding that. And in this book he says, God designs us to be productive, but we build our identities around our activities. We are not living in the truth of who God created us to be. We have become human doings rather than human beings. We need a biblical framework for a rhythm of life that allows us to be fruitful in balance with being at rest. We need to be secure in who we are based on what Christ did for us on the cross and the very great promises we have that are loved and accepted by him. We must stop striving to gain the acceptance of others by what we do, leading a driven lifestyle. God created man and woman on the sixth day, setting them in the garden full of wild, wonderful creatures and delicious food. He gave them instruction on caring for the animals and plants in the garden. He told them to be fruitful, but on the first full day of existence for Adam and Eve, God rested. All of creation took a well-deserved break in activity. This was our first full day, a day of rest. Then the work began. From this, we see an important principle of life. We are to work from our rest, not rest from our work. We are to work from our rest, not rest from our work. Now, if we have a think about the Bible reading that we had today, the gospel reading we had, we shift to seeing Jesus. So this is just after Jesus is being baptized, and he goes into a town nearby, and he goes to work. He calls people to him, he heals people, he sends out demons. And after that long day of working, we've all worked 10-hour days, I'm 100% sure of it. Maybe for those kids in the room, you've had a long day at school where you had back-to-back lessons and things at lunchtime, maybe you had sport after school. We all have long days. And so Jesus has had one of the biggest days. He's been in the desert for 40 days. He comes back and all these people are like, oh my gosh, please fix my knees and take these demons out of me. And he's like, yep, let's do it. And then he wakes up at 4 o'clock the next morning. That's insane. Can we just appreciate the fact that he worked a 12-hour day and then went up at 4 o'clock in the morning to do something? Insane. I would never. But he went out to rest. He worked this big day and then he went, I'm going to get up early to rest. Insane thing, because wouldn't you sleep? No. Instead, he decided, I'm going to spend time with God. I'm going to spend time with my Creator, my Father. So he gives really heavily to this one area of his life. He spends ages working, and in response to this tired, worn out, exhausted Jesus, he goes, I need to give to this other area of my life, this area that's now lacking because I've given so much to one place, and that is to spend time with God. Now, Jesus is like our perfect example of equilibrium. If you remember that, he's giving to one, and when there's an unbalance, he gives more to the other. Now, he was surrounded by people, and he was constantly working, and he retreats to be with God. God is established in Jesus' routine, and he works more. The more he works, the more he rests. The further you read through the gospel, you see more of Jesus working a lot, and then you see more of him taking time to rest himself. But he always rests. Now think about us. We're not in the Garden of Eden. We're not Jesus. I think there are two things we can cross off of our list. Everything in the world is not all fine and dandy. We don't have this perfect garden that we've put in where we're in perfect harmony always with God. We're not Jesus, and we don't have the opportunity to be in that perfect connection with God. There's stress in our systems. So it's our job to work towards an intentional equilibrium in our lives. I'm going to have the next slide, please. Okay, so one of the things I said puts stress on the workload is concentration. So that means if you put more of one chemical in to this system, then it's going to favor more of the other one so that they can be equal. So if I put more of this, they're going to go like this, right? Now in our lives, this might look like our workload. Maybe you have your life and you're getting a bit more responsibility. You're in a church community, something's happened, maybe your pastor's just left, and they're asking you to do more things. There's rosters to be filled, there's places that need volunteers, and so you're doing a little bit more in that space. Then you've gone to work on Monday, your boss has said, we've had someone quit, we're spreading the workload over the community, so you're going to have to pick up a little bit more slack. So your church and work life go up. And that means your friends, your health, the time you spend with God by yourself, that's going down. So to fix this, you need to focus on other things in your life. That's friends and that's God. You're going to spend a little bit more time in those spaces, being intentional, so that the balance of one can go up and it can come down. Now that is a little bit hard. I'm not saying that by any means this is easy, but this is what we're called to work towards as Christians. Let's have a look at the next slide. Now, as you can see, we didn't think about our health. So now our health is bad. Waking up in the morning, I'm not feeling great. I got to go to the doctor. So when we're focusing on other things like our health can decline, whether that's physical health, mental health, spiritual health, emotional health, all these things can take an impact. And so then we have to focus a little bit less on other people, focus on what we're putting out, and pay a bit more attention on what we're putting in, what we're bringing in. It's time to reap, not time to sow. So we focus a little bit more on our health. Look at that amazing equation at the bottom. All is restored. Now, if we look at the next slide, we're going to uni now. This is a bit, if you can't tell, this is a bit related to my life. We're going to uni. I'm just going to uni for the first time in a few weeks. I'm very excited about it, but it's going to be a really big change in my life. There's something new coming into the system. The third thing I said that can impact the system is volume. If you put more of one chemical in, it's going to go up. In the same way, if you make the container smaller, then one of them is going to go up, and it's going to have to work to make it better. So now I have more demands in my system. For you, this could be maybe you've got someone moving into your house, maybe you've got people you need to take places, maybe you have a new opportunity that's come up that you really want to take, but now you have to rework your entire routine to fit this. And so then you have to take a little bit more time to rebalance. The more demands we have to take time to rebalance our lives. You don't need to spend less time doing things, you just need to work out a routine where the workload is shared. Okay, I think if I can have the last slide. Okay, now this is what our equilibrium should look like, what our equation might look like. We have us in our lives, You spend a lot of your time thinking about yourself, but you also have other things that you give to: work, uni, friends, people. And that's a constant give and take in that part of your life. I'm going to be giving time to my friends, and I'm going to be giving up and sacrificing things to spend time doing things. And in the same way, they're going to be sacrificing things to spend time with me. But if we have a look on the left, the one thing that is most important is that we're giving time to God. And the time that we give to God is actually going to be refilling us to this person, to this perfect equilibrium. The circumstances in our life create unbalance. The things that happen, we're not a closed system, so there's going to be things that happen day to day that impact this thing. Something might happen, there might be traffic on the way to work, already beginning of a long day. You get home, your kids don't want to go to sleep. I mean, I don't have that problem because I don't have children, but sometimes I don't want to go to sleep. And there's all these things that happen in our lives that just throw everything out of whack. Our job as Christians is to restore this balance, to make it all equal. And this often comes from sitting at the foot of the cross, from spending time with Jesus. So I encourage all of you, whether you're going into your second week of teaching a lot of children and you need to think about how your life is looking, maybe you're back at work and there's more things coming up, maybe your life is in balance at the moment. But I encourage you to have a think about this week what it is that you're going to do to restore some equilibrium to the system. Whether you're going to focus on your health a little bit more. It's okay to take more and give less if that's what you need to live a balanced life. Are you going to cut things out of your life? Are things being added to your life and you need to rework your routine? Normally that's fixed by sitting at the foot of the cross. So I encourage you this week to have a little think about what that's going to look like. I encourage the band to come up for our next song.